All right. Today on Northwestern Voices, I'm joined by Kjenaas, who is the chair of the Hubbard County Democratic Party. And as you know, Friday, we interviewed State Senator Paul Utke regarding the appointment of Governor Walz of Minnesota to be the running mate of Vice President Kamala Harris in the 2024 presidential election. And so Paul was asked certain questions on Friday, and I'm going to ask you the exact same questions to get the Democratic Party point of view on all of these subjects as well. So thank you for joining me today, Kjenaas.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So before we get started on the questions, I just wanted to ask you briefly about your experience with working with the Democratic Party in Hubbard County and the process that led to your being elected chair of that organization.
That's a great question. I've been very interested in politics for years, really for my whole life, since when I became an adult, but I've never been involved in organized politics other than voting and giving my opinion, mostly to my wife. But people here knew me, and some of the folks that have been doing this, working hard for the local DFL, have put in their time and done a lot. And so originally they asked me if I would be interested, and I said, well, this is not something I've done before. But they said, that's okay. We just need a leader, and we need somebody that will come in and do the work. And I thought about it, and I said, well, okay, if you'd like me to do that, I will go ahead and do that. I think it's an important year. Mm-hmm. It's very crucial what's happening, not only nationally, but locally as well. And so I thought, well, okay, I'm going to give it a shot.
Okay, wonderful. And when did you take over that position?
That would have been earlier this year. I can't remember the exact date, but I started chairing the meetings, I believe, in April. Mm-hmm. And we have one monthly meeting that is the second Monday of every month. It's at the library.
Okay.
At 6:00, we have a discussion where we'll talk about various topics. The last one, President Biden had not yet bowed out, so we talked about what was going on there. And people had all kinds of different opinions. Everybody expressed their opinion respectfully, and It was quite tense, though.
Sure.
But now things are in a much better place, obviously.
So you have the discussion first, and then the meeting starts at 7, or
correct?
That's how that works.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. That's kind of a neat idea. Okay, now you're ready to be the spokesman for all Democrats in Hubbard County, right?
Oh, absolutely. I represent everyone. My opinion is the only one.
Well, hopefully it'll be representative of what most people think are on the Democratic side. So.
Yes, the platform.
The platform, there we go. All right, so I'll just read the same intro that I did regarding Governor Walz on Friday, which is that Governor Walz is Nebraskan by birth. He was born in 1964, which would make him 60 years old, if my math is correct. He moved to Minnesota in 1996, where he became a high school social studies teacher and football linebackers coach. He was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 2006 and was reelected 5 times before being elected governor of Minnesota in 2018, and he has served in that position since then. He also served in the National Guard from 1981 until May of 2005. All right, so the first question I have for you is kind of a general question. So what are the duties and responsibilities of the running mate to the United States presidential candidate, and how do you believe Governor Walz will, or do you believe that he has the ability to fulfill those duties and responsibilities?
Oh, absolutely. He has experience as a legislator. He has executive experience. He's ready to step in as president, which is the number one qualification. But also, I think one of the reasons he was picked is because he's incredibly supportive. He doesn't seem to have an agenda beyond this. He said, this is the job that I want. I'm here to support Kamala Harris. What can I do for you? Mm-hmm. So I think he's going to be helpful on many different levels, both in terms of his experience in order to be an advisor, but also just his positive support and his sort of inspiring energy.
Yeah. So a lot of it has to do with campaigning frankly, right? And do you think he does a good job with that? And what sort of like how do you feel like his abilities are a good complement to Vice President Harris?
Well, I think they're both, and I don't know whether this would be a compliment, but I think it's an exponential factor. They're both doing this in a very positive and joyful way. And it's such a contrast to what we've been going through for the last 8 years that I think people are like, wow, you mean we can talk about how good things are in this country? We can say America is the greatest country in the world. We can say our economy is stronger than any other country in the world. Yes, we can. Mm-hmm. Not to use that phrase again, right. But it's true. Yeah. It's true. And so he compliments her in that way. He also is obviously an older white guy, if you look at demographics, mm-hmm. and I think that can appeal to people who are afraid of changing demographics and afraid of, losing their place. He's a very down-to-earth, rural guy, mm-hmm. practical.
So the second question, in 1992, James Carville, the famous Democratic strategist, coined the famous phrase, "Is the economy stupid?" Mm-hmm. Heard that one before. What do you perceive to be Governor Walz's record on the Minnesota state economy during his 5 years in office? And do you believe that his record here will help or hurt Vice President Harris's opinion with the voters, and why?
Definitely think it will help. Obviously, the last 5 years have been a very tough and unique time with COVID, both trying to manage the government during that, and then the supply chain problems that affected the economy after, not just in Minnesota, obviously, but throughout the country and throughout the world. And one of the things I would say about how Governor Walz has handled this is if you compare Minnesota to the nation, the unemployment rate in the U.S. is 4.1. Minnesota is 2.9. The national inflation rate is 3.3, and here it's 2.6. So on very important economic comparisons, we're doing far better than the United States. The U.S. News and World Report just ranked Minnesota as the 4th best state to live in on 71 different quality measures. Wow. Mm-hmm. So I think he's been doing very well on the economy, and I think he'll help nationally with that too. Some of the programs that the Biden-Harris administration has started, I believe, will continue. They have created more jobs than at any time in the past. They have brought back manufacturing jobs and invested in that. And people that have high school diplomas are going to be able to get better jobs and already are getting better jobs because of these economic policies.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So then let's dive into a difficult topic, that being that of abortion. So Governor Walz signed legislation codifying abortion rights, repealing essentially all the state's restrictions and adding protections for patients who travel from states where abortion is restricted. Among the restrictions eliminated were a 24-hour waiting period and a parental consent requirement for an abortion. The governor joined VP Harris in a Planned Parenthood clinic in March. Former President Trump has consistently stated that abortion is a states' rights issue and has not included a national abortion ban as part of the party's platform in this election. Given that the Supreme Court's holding in Dobbs did not address the question of fetal viability, how much of the, I'll call it rhetoric coming out of the Harris-Walz campaign that a Trump presidency would result in the elimination of abortion from states which clearly want it, should be validated? Are these legitimate fears? And whether they are or not, how big of an issue do you believe that abortion or right to choice is going to be in this election? And does that issue favor Walz's position or the Democratic Party's position, or hurt Vice President Harris's chances of being elected president? Sorry, that was a long question.
There was a lot to digest there, but I think it's important. It's a very important topic and will continue to be. I mean, obviously, people have their own personal feelings about this, but I think the bottom line difference is that it should be a matter of choice. And in terms of viability, I think Roe v. Wade had it right at about 24 or 26 weeks. Technology may make that go earlier. And then in which case the weeks should be shortened. But overall, I think it should be a national right for women, and I think that he will support that.
The 24 to 26 weeks being the time at which that it could or should not happen.
That's when there should be no more abortions, except for, exceptions.
Except for certain exceptions, okay. And I guess that's sort of the question on this is that, well, first of all, is this a big issue? Is this going to be a major issue in the campaign? And then, the fact that there had been these sort of restrictions that were eliminated in Minnesota. Like the Republicans ran a campaign earlier this year that talked about these things are just too extreme, right? That they're eliminating the 24-hour waiting period or the parental consent or reducing the need for all life-saving care except for comfort care after the child is born. These things are just too extreme. And so, do you believe is that true? I mean, are his positions a little bit far beyond what most people would accept as appropriate?
I think sometimes things seem extreme when they really are practical if you look at the individual circumstance. So let's take the first one that you mentioned.
Yep.
No 24-hour waiting period and no parental
consent required.
Mm-hmm. What if you're talking about a girl who's 14 years old and she's been raped by her father and she's pregnant?
Right.
So there are it's very extreme to have a law that prevents her from doing it at that point. Mm-hmm. So I think the extremities really are on the opposite side, and American people agree. I mean, if you look at what's happened state by state with the referendums, Kentucky voted for a woman's right to choose.
Right. Yeah.
Oklahoma.
Kansas did too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that where we live right here in Hubbard County, which is really what's relevant, it's a similar area. People are quite conservative, and they're honestly concerned about both the mother and the unborn child. Mm-hmm. And so we respect that. But it also comes back to kind of what, Governor Walz says in a way with these choices. You can make your own choice. We respect that, but mind your own damn business.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, and you do see this as being one of the major issues in the campaign.
I do. I thought President Trump, former President Trump, the other day in his press conference was wishing. A lot of times he says things that he wishes were true.
Okay.
And he said, well, it's not going to be a big deal. And he says things like, everybody wanted Roe to be overturned. Everybody wanted it to go to the states.
Right.
That's patently false.
Right.
Most people didn't want Roe to be overturned, and most people didn't want it to go to the states. But he just says what he wants to believe. Just like for years he said, we got the best economy in the world. Right. It's the best economy in the world under me.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't. It was a slight slowdown from the end of the Obama administration all the way up until, we can only really fairly count it up until when COVID happened. Mm-hmm. But his expansion of jobs, he said that once he passed that $1.8 trillion tax cut, that growth would be at 5, 6, even 7%. Well, it never got that high. It never got up to 3% during his entire presidency before COVID. Mm-hmm. So, and not only that, but the deficit went up far quicker than it has, even under Biden, with all of these things that they complain about being liberal investments. Mm-hmm. So, you really have to look at that. And I'm sorry, I got on a little tangent there.
No, but so the rhetoric. So you're saying the rhetoric coming from the Republican side, former President Trump, is that the people would favor the issue being returned to the states, which is essentially what the Dobbs decision did. It basically said that there is no fundamental right to have an abortion, and so that it should be something that could be regulated by the states. And you don't think that is accurate? No,
I think because of the right to privacy and the right for the woman to determine her own destiny in terms of family, and the couple to determine their own destiny in terms of how they want to manage and create their family is very important. Women have gained a lot of freedom once this happened. They can make choices. And the reason the viability is an issue is because if somebody is, let's say, 6 weeks pregnant, they may not even know that they are.
Right.
And it was an unplanned pregnancy. I believe that at that point, there's no way that the embryo could survive without the mother being there, being alive. Once the embryo can survive outside of the womb, then I understand.
Outside of the womb, yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, that's kind of a hot button issue. Let's move on to another one.
Okay.
Immigration. So on immigration, Governor Walz, and I am trying to just keep all these things sort of relating back to Governor Walz. So he did sign legislation last year to extend health care and public health insurance to undocumented immigrants as part of a budget agreement last year. Was this policy popular in Minnesota, and will this help or hurt the Harris campaign in the fall? And what other immigration policies has Governor Walz espoused that you feel will either help or harm this candidacy?
Well, on a state level, I think that whenever you have people that have health care and are going in for preventive care, whether they're poor, whether they're immigrants, or whether it's you or me, it's a good idea to go ahead and help them. It's
treat them.
A fundamental human right.
It's like a humanitarian issue. Almost.
Absolutely, and it's good for society, too, because it's just going to end up being more expensive in the long run if you let those things go. Immigrants, one of the things you hear is, these immigrants are coming in and taking all our money or taking all our benefits. But a lot of immigrants work. They pay into Social Security. They don't receive any Social Security benefits. So in a way, in our country, we need more younger workers, whether they come from it doesn't matter where they come from.
Our birth rates declined.
Yeah, right? Exactly. And so we need that to fuel our economy. And one of the things what are the two things that Trump says he's going to do about immigration? Let's just go there.
Sure.
He says he's going to deport 10 million people. That would be a disaster. Absolute disaster for our economy. Everybody recognizes that. Economists from both sides. It's completely impractical. It's based on fear. The other thing he says in terms of his economic plan is that he wants to do a 10% tariff on everything that comes from other countries. I don't know, maybe he doesn't understand the concept that we're the ones that are paying that tax. And so
we pay that in higher prices, you mean?
Exactly, yeah. I think it would be an average of $3,000 per couple per year in essentially a tax increase.
Yeah. Engaging in a trade war essentially with a country like China or something like that.
Exactly.
Is there any validity to the idea that we should be encouraging more legal immigration and discouraging the illegal immigration? As far as you talk about deportations, deporting 10 million people is a lot, but if they actually entered the country illegally, how do we deal with that as a society?
That's a great question, and the Senate came up with a bill that was bipartisan and actually more favored by Republicans
that was
than Democrats.
My next question. Was that the Langford-Sinema bill?
Yes.
Okay.
And in that bill, there was a lot of border security measures, a lot of things that Republicans really wanted and Democrats really honestly didn't. But there also were ways for a path to citizenship for folks. If they've lived here for over 10 years, and I don't know the exact things, but let's put it this way. I think the Republicans were more excited than the Democrats about this. It would have been the most comprehensive immigration bill since the 50s. And Donald Trump didn't want it to happen, so he said, stop this. And then the House said, we're not going to pass it even if the Senate did. And it put a kibosh on it. And the reason that he did that was because he wanted to keep it around as an issue. Eventually, President Biden did do executive order, which is a temporary solution that Trump also did, and now the illegal immigration is way down. People crossing the border is way down.
Do you have any current statistics on that? I'm curious. I don't. So it'd be.
I don't have exact ones, but I know that it's comparable to what was happening during the Trump administration.
Okay.
So that executive order works, but what you're doing is that you're basically saying it's kind of against the law because you're saying you don't have the right to seek asylum, or we're going to just kick people back without looking at that. So the other part of the bill I think that Democrats liked that was going to happen was getting more judges to adjudicate these cases and have other people be able to do it. So that instead of waiting 10 years and let somebody go in the United States.
Because the backlog is ridiculous, right?
So, that was a solution that I think, and not only that, but Kamala Harris said, I will sign that bill. And if she gets elected and there's a Democratic Congress and a Democratic Senate, she has pledged to do that. So I think Republicans would be happy even in that instance.
To sign that same Langford-Sinema bill.
Yeah.
So you believe that this bill was killed under former President Trump's influence in the House?
Yeah, I don't think there's any debate about that. I think everybody agrees that. The senators were very upset.
Okay.
I mean, Langford during the State of the Union said that's true when President Biden brought it up.
Some of the rhetoric you hear from the other side is that, we don't need new laws. We just need to enforce the laws that we currently have on the books. Any merit to that?
Yeah, I think there's some merit to that. I think, though, the problem is that the laws are contradictory. If you just say black and white, okay, you cannot come in unless you've gone through all the steps. Mm-hmm. That's true, except if you're fleeing some kind of persecution or threat to your life or your children's life, then we need to take a look at it. That's international law.
Does the bill that I haven't read through it. I mean, usually these bills are voluminous, so mm-hmm. I'm not. I wouldn't expect that you had read the entire bill either. But just out of curiosity, do you know if it has some sort of an expedited way to determine the meritoriousness of some of these claims of asylum? Because of course, there are people who are coming from countries where they are legitimately being hunted down and persecuted, prosecuted. I know a gentleman from Haiti, actually, who is a resident in this community, who had been he started to become popular in his little county in Haiti, and then the gang started to take notice because he had influence, and then they started threatening his life. And so he came to the United States, and he had a story that said that I was getting involved in politics in Haiti, and then these gang members didn't like me, and so they legitimately so there's an example of somebody who's got a story. But I think, and whether it's true or not, I think there's a perception out there that you have the people coming up here saying, well, just say this or just say that, and none of it's verifiable. And in terms of a story as to why they're the particular requirements that are necessary to show for asylum are met. Does this bill address any of that, or how do we get around that issue?
They're gonna appoint at least 500 adjudicators.
So the judges, okay.
Well, they don't necessarily even have to be judges, so they can do it earlier to weed out obvious cases that are not asylum.
Oh. Okay.
And ultimately, I think the estimates are that less than 10% of people will actually be ultimately let into the country.
Yeah.
But now, the reason all these folks are here is because there's no way to adjudicate it. So it's like, okay, you got your court case in 2035. Come on back and see us then.
Yeah.
And then you've created this situation where people have been working, living in this country, and now you're rejected. So they're going to.
Yeah, that doesn't seem justice delayed is justice denied, right?
Exactly. And the Republicans have some other very things that I agree with. The drug flow it needs to be stopped. There's a lot more money for that, both technology solutions and personnel. So
human trafficking, another one. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a lot of things. Believe it or not, there's a lot of things that we agree on with immigration.
Imagine that there's some common ground here. It just seems so divisive. I
think a lot of it is fear, and people look at somebody that's different and they say this person's going to take my job. Or if you look at the idea of say homosexuality, I know we're not talking about that, but people are they may firmly believe morally that it's wrong, and they certainly have a right to do that. But I think that once we have made the country more free and more open for people to express themselves, then it seems like, well, there's more of these different people around. Mm-hmm. There aren't. There's the same amount as there were before. It's just that people are free to be who they are.
Right.
And that's not exactly related to immigration, but what I'd say is that I think most of the people that come over are not rapists or from insane asylums. Uh-huh. I don't know where he gets that. Yeah. I don't know about the insane asylums in Mexico. Yeah, but they're rather people that are struggling, either because they're under threat or because they want a better opportunity. And they know America is a place in the world where you can come here, you can freely earn a living, you can grow your family.
Land of opportunity.
Exactly, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. Whenever I hear that kind of rhetoric, I always think of. Did you? I know this is kind of an odd reference, but did you ever see the movie Scarface?
I did. It's been a while, but I did.
At
yeah.
the beginning of Scarface, I think they put up this little bit of text that says that, you know, in such and such year, Fidel Castro emptied out all of his jails and in asylums and stuff, and then they sent them all over to the United States, and they showed up in the port of Miami on boats and stuff like that, and of course, you know, Al Pacino's character Scarface was one of them, you know, and so I think there's a little bit of a collective remnant of a memory about that movie when that comes up, you know, for people to think, oh yeah, I remember that, you know, like that's what they were talking about at Scarface or whatever, you know.
Well, I think there are going to be a small percentage of criminals that come through,
right,
and it's just that gets exponentially taken out of context.
And there's going to be some criminals, yeah. I mean, and I think there have been particularly notorious examples of criminals who have come to this country, you know, illegally, or asylum seekers, or maybe not even asylum seekers, maybe just people who got through and have committed some heinous murders. And I think the families of some of those people were, you know, highlighted during the Republican convention, and you know, I think But I like your point before where you said that it's just you notice these things because, you know, they're I guess it's just more out in the open, or I don't know, whatever.
Well, there are huge numbers.
Yeah,
and I mean,
there are a lot of numbers. There's going to be statistical anomalies no matter what, right?
Yeah, and if we do pass this bill, right, and we can adjudicate these cases, and it is less than 10% of the people coming over, not only will there be fewer immigrants, but they'll be much more fully vetted. Mm-hmm. So we need to reform that process.
Yeah, and I think that process, the vetting process, is going to be a huge undertaking too, because you talk about adjudicating out certain people who just simply don't have claims. But then then you've got this probably category of people who have what are facially sufficient claims, but that need a fact adjudication, and that's where you're going to run into problems no matter what, because there are going to be so many claimants. But
that's true.
It's a challenge. There's absolutely no doubt, and I don't think there's an easy answer to this, but it certainly does make for a hot button political issue, because, like you say, black and white usually plays better with the voters than sort of a gray solution, right?
One thing, just to go back to sort of tying this into the economy, we need workers, and corporations realize that, and the folks that come in from these South American countries through Mexico are usually almost always not taking jobs away from current Americans. They're fulfilling needs that need to be met. Mm-hmm. If you look at what's happened under Tim Walz in Minnesota, for instance, since 2019, personal income has gone up 30% over the 5 years, higher than the rate of inflation. Now, that doesn't mean prices aren't too high and that we don't need to, but what it shows is that there's a tremendous amount of growth. And if we limit immigration too much, wherever it comes from, that's going to slow down our growth and our economy. We need it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Moving on then to guns, the question of guns and Second Amendment. So Governor Walz had been popular among the gun lobby as recently as 2016, when he earned an A rating from the NRA regarding his stance on the Second Amendment. He actually had an A rating in 2016. That grade has now slipped to an F on account of his signing into law comprehensive gun safety measures in May of 2023, and other comments that he made in April that year, which seemed to support a so-called assault weapons ban. Among those 2023 gun safety measures were universal background checks, which would limit private party transfers of pistols and semi-automatic weapons, extreme risk protection orders, those are the red flag laws, and those would allow law enforcement to prevent gun possession upon receiving a credible report of danger. And some say that those laws are too restrictive and are part of a slippery slope toward confiscation and a total ban of firearms in this country or in this state. So do you believe that Governor Walz's record on gun ownership will help or hurt the ticket in the 2024 election?
I think it'll help the ticket. The evolution that people have gone through on this, it's gone through waves throughout the past. So in the 90s, we had an assault weapons ban, and then mass shootings went way down. And then once that sunsetted, and these weapons of war began to come back onto the streets, I think this constant, incidence of mass shootings has an impact on everybody. And then eventually people start going, okay, we want to be free to have our firearms. We want to be able to be free to hunt, to protect ourselves. We want to be able to be free to have fun and go out and fire these weapons that are fun to fire, which I think could still happen even if there were a ban. Mm-hmm. You still could have automatic weapons that you could go to a range and target practice and shoot that way. But I do think it's changed. I think people are once again saying, okay, so you're free to have your gun. How about, am I free to go to a theater in a city and feel safe? Mm-hmm. Am I free to go to a concert and feel safe? There is a balance that has to be made there. And the Supreme Court from very early on has made limitations. I mean, machine guns were outlawed. And
fully automatic.
Yes, fully automatic weapons. So I just think that's where do we draw the line. I don't know of anybody, the most liberal that said we should outlaw guns or take guns away. Mm-hmm. Personal protection pistols, hunting rifles. Have you ever heard anybody that proposed that? Is that even real? So is there a slippery slope there? I don't think so.
Okay. Before the assault weapons ban that took place earlier, that had sunsetted, as you said, we didn't seem to have all these incidents of mass shootings either. At least they weren't documented. What do you think has changed in the American psyche to make these things so prevalent? Oh, and I think back, I remember when I was in college, the Columbine shooting, and I think it was like 1998, or I think it was 1998 or 1999, because I would have been a junior or senior in college. I just be riveted to the television about this, saying like, I can't believe this is happening. Like, this is just so outrageous, because I just remember it as being sort of like the first time that something like this happened, and it was not that long ago, right? 26 and less than 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. So what has changed, in your view, that has now made these things become so prevalent in our country?
I think that for the most part, I think culture, like movies and video games, actually follow what's going on. Mm-hmm. So if you look back in the 50s...
So they're an effect, not a cause, in other words.
Yes,
right.
yes.
Uh-huh.
So if you look back in the 50s when they were making movies like Rebel Without a Cause, mm-hmm. it was because several years earlier there had been gang violence and people were using knives.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So it wasn't the fact that they started making these movies and people said, oh, let's go stab people.
Yeah.
So it is the number that are available. And, the number of these weapons that are available. We've been talking a lot about statistics, but if you have these readily available weapons of war, there are people that are not mentally stable.
Yeah.
There are people that are angry. They're going through adolescence. There's a whole wide range of reasons why many people should not have access to these weapons.
Right.
Whether we keep them legal and safe or not.
So there's always been mentally unstable people, but what's changed is that there are more guns in the country now than there were back in the 50s and 60s and things like that. Is that
absolutely? I mean, if you look at the other countries around the world that don't have automatic weapons legal, they have stabbing incidents. They have a lot of crazy people that are violent.
Yeah.
But they don't have mass shootings.
Right. Okay. Okay, so then question of peace. What experience, ability, or character trait do you believe Governor Walz possesses that will help him assist the president or Vice President Harris, if she's elected, to achieve world peace?
World peace. So that's an easy one.
Yeah. It'll never happen.
It's obviously we have some big conflicts that are going on now.
Right.
The largest ground invasion in Europe since World War II. We have the situation in Israel and Gaza, and both of them are very difficult situations. I think that that they'll continue to work on them. And right now, it looks like Ukraine is making some headway.
You don't hear much about it these days.
No, but they just in the last couple of days did an incursion into Russia.
Oh, you're talking about military?
Yeah,
Okay.
they've made some military progress.
Uh-huh.
And so I think that bolsters people saying, okay, we're going to stand up for this country that was invaded.
Yeah.
And so I think that situation will continue to get better. And Israel and Gaza are going to have to come up with a solution. I think one of the things that frustrates me about this situation is that everybody, whether they're pro-Palestinian or pro-Israeli, they all think that the original attack where 1,200 people were murdered and tortured when Hamas attacked Israel was unconscionable and awful. They also think that the attacks on the city centers where the Hamas leaders are that kill innocent civilians and children is unacceptable. And they think somehow that the president, whoever they may be, of the United States can cure this. But keep in mind, Israel is an independent country. They're a democracy. They're very rich. Even though we give arms to them, arms deals, it's a small percentage of their overall defense budget. And the ones that have been withdrawn were the large 2,000 and 1,000 pound bombs, which decimate urban areas and cannot be smart weapons. So other than that, I don't know what kind of leverage President Biden or a President Harris or a President Trump would have, although I'm sure President Trump would say that he would end it in 3 days.
Well, he said that about the Ukraine conflict, right?
Yeah, so long as Benjamin Netanyahu is in the lead there, I think it's going to be tough.
Switching back over to Ukraine briefly, United States government has spent a lot of money on investing in weapons and all kinds of missiles and things like that to assist Ukraine. Do you see that continuing under a Harris-Walz presidency, vice presidency? And at some point, do you think that the American people are going to start feeling fatigued over that with all the spending?
I think that it will continue, and I think that Russia is on their back foot right now, economically, and in terms of their military. They're really in a bad position. So
it's a winnable war.
Yes, I think they'll go to the table and come up with a solution that will. I don't know whether. I don't know the particulars about this, and foreign policy is not my expertise. So I don't know whether they would get Crimea back, but I think they get much of Ukraine back that Russia has gone into.
Okay, and that's going to be the policy going forward under a Harris-Walz administration.
Yeah, because even though Ukraine is not a member of NATO, they are a country that has been invaded with no provocation.
Right,
and that is against the UN Charter since after World War II. Which is why not just the United States, but the European countries and many other countries are very upset with Russia for doing this.
It's a pretext. Well, they of course, Russia's got their own point of view on it. I don't know if you heard President Putin talk about his rationale for, because of course the Russian people have or Russian president, I should say, maybe not the Russian people per se, but have a different view of it. But, it seems like it's one of these where it's, kind of like what you talked about with Palestine and Israel. It's like these are internal conflicts and things that have gone back, hundreds if not thousands of years, and it seems like it's tough. Like I liked what you said, that it's tough for the American president or our administration to really resolve these things once and for all. I guess in both of those conflicts, though, the question that that comes to mind, at least for many people, is how much money are we going to be spending on these things, and how long is it going to last?
And it's wonderful in the United States. Yeah. We can talk about that.
Yeah.
In Russia, you can't. Putin makes the decision. So when you said, I don't know what the Russian people think, they can't say what they think. If they say that it's a war, they go to jail.
Right.
Whereas here, if you don't think we should be supporting Ukraine, you vote for people, you vote that way, you discuss it, you debate it, you talk about what are the pros or the cons, because yes, unlimited treasury for weapons of war is not good, and having a war go on isn't good. But you have to say, okay, here are people that were invaded. They're fighting for freedom. they're on the border of other nations that are part of NATO. So if Russia decides to move forward after
Poland,
that, yeah, that means that according to our UN charter, we would have to get military directly involved.
Yeah.
So
that's what we got to avoid at all costs.
And I think most Republicans agree with that. There's a certain number of Republican House members that are very extreme on many issues, and they have an outweighted voice.
Right.
And hopefully this election cycle will change that. I believe that's going to happen.
Okay. Which that's a good segue into my next question, which is, do you feel confident about the future of our area, state, and country?
I'm glad you weren't asking me this a month ago. Yes.
Yes. Now you do. Yeah.
I do. I feel very.
Gee, what changed?
I feel very, very confident. I think that there's two things that people in the United States love more than anything. One thing is an underdog, and the other is a winner. And right now, we're underdogs, but we're also winning. Democrats have been winning over the last 3 cycles, winning everywhere, even in those red states when there are referendums for issues that we care about. The things that Republicans criticize are what people want. It's like they criticize Walz for expanding lunch and breakfast benefits for kids, getting rid of hungry children, expanding the child tax credit. Now they're talking about how they want that, but they're the ones that let it sunset. Republicans did. So paid family leave. They frame these things as scary liberal things, but this is what people want. And we have the right and the freedom to choose those. And Governor Walz will help us with that, and so will Kamala Harris. We're going to move the country forward.
Okay. I think you may have touched on this a little bit when we were talking about some other topic, but are there any positions in your party's platform that you disagree with personally?
That's a good point. I would have to thoroughly know the platform, which I should.
Plank by plank.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure there are. I can't think of any off the top of my head. It might be the degree to which we do some of these things. Some people would want an issue to be more priority, and some want less. So it would be that way. It probably wouldn't be a total philosophical difference, but I wish I could get back to you on that because I could actually read the platform and check.
Sure. Okay. Well, maybe sometime you can come back and talk to us then.
Yeah.
Divisiveness. Do you feel that the Republican Party represents a threat to our country? And what are some of the best or worst aspects of the Republican Party from your point of view?
The traditional Republican Party does not pose a threat. They're necessary. We need a strong party. There have been times in the past when taxes have been too high, and we needed to do some supply side stuff. People don't realize that during the 50s, even though at that point we were post World War II, and we had this huge benefit that the rest of the industrialized worlds were struggling to rebuild. They were very poor. There wasn't really global competition, so our economy was humming. But there was because a lot of government programs, the GI Bill, building interstates, the marginal tax rate in the 50s and early 60s for the high income earners was 90% income tax. Taxes were too high. Okay, so JFK came in and he lowered them down to 60. They still probably were too high.
Right.
So in other words, there are times, but over the last, generally since Ronald Reagan, we've created a structural deficit because people say we don't want to pay taxes, and not even talking about who, but let's just say before the 1980s, the Americans, everybody paid 19% in taxes, and at that point there were no deficits. People just
a flat rate tax.
No, not a flat rate tax. Overall,
average,
if you took everybody, and obviously the more wealthy people were paying much larger percentage then. They can't pay all of it because there's not as many.
Sure.
And
they also have the mobility issue too, is that if they don't, at some point, if the taxes are too high, then they simply decide that they're going to take their ball and go home, right? Go somewhere else.
Yeah, economic growth will go down if taxes are way too high. So that's probably the only thing I agree with Milton Friedman on and supply side. So, but as I said in the 80s, then our average has been between 17 and 18% overall as a country. Everybody thinks taxes are so much higher now. They are not higher now. They may be higher on the middle class and poorer people, those who have enough money to pay taxes. But taxes are lower, both corporate taxes and individual income taxes for high earners. There are some reasons for that other than basic economics. It's global economy. The global economy has changed everything. So that's why we're now bringing some jobs back. I think this isn't just a Republican-Democrat thing, because COVID made us realize we should be manufacturing some things here because we need them.
Yeah.
And so now...
What if, right? We couldn't... The N95 or whatever, some of these things that we needed were manufactured overseas.
Yes.
We didn't have them, right?
And like computer chips. So the CHIPS Act, and so many things are dependent on those that we need to take care of that ourselves, and we're starting to do that. And the consequence of that is getting a lot of more high-paying jobs for people with not as much education. So I think the people that have been so angry since the 70s and 80s, you used to be able to have one person earning enough for a family of five, and still be able to go on a vacation. Naturally, people are frustrated.
Now people, especially young people, when they hear that, they scoff, don't they?
Oh, yeah. So, a lot of the anger, that built up to what happened over the last 8 years is justified. But I do think that we have a solution. Harris and Walz have a solution for that, and we're going to work toward it. We're already starting to. Things are looking up.
Do you feel as though, just to follow up with that the work ethic of the American people has remained the same, it's steady throughout all those years, and there's been no change in that? Like, you hear a lot about now, they say, I guess every generation has said this, but kids nowadays, they don't want to work. They want to have all these special hours and be treated differently and not really go through some of the hard knocks that many of us did as we were coming up in the ranks. Is there any merit to that, do you think? Or
yeah, I think there is, but I think there's good reasons. So if you were a kid in the 50s and you got a minimum wage job, you knew that likely in 10 years you'd be working in your dad's factory and you'd be making 10 times that or 20 times that.
Right.
And so, okay, I'm going to make my spending money. I'm going to work up. It was a very natural thing. Now, if you get a minimum wage job, there isn't the pathway for as many people. And we have all these jobs that we need. Service workers, people doing a job that isn't going to pay a lot of money. So those folks need to have fair pay. They need to have fair benefits because we need them. We need those jobs. We need those workers.
Well, like I was thinking, like the fast food restaurant workers and stuff like that, how they had, there was some mandate, I think in New York actually, not too long ago, where they had increased the minimum wage for the fast food workers to be something like $15, $16. But of course, the counter to that is okay, well then you see the prices go up, So there's got to be some happy medium there somewhere where both sides can get together and the prices stay down. But I think it does have a lot more to do, like what you said before, with hope, right? About hope for advancement, or, having McDonald's be a job that, maybe you hold for 3 or 4 years when you're young, but then move on to something bigger and better than that. And it was never really intended to be a job that you were going to have as a career. You're certainly not be able to support a family of 5 with a job like that. But so I guess it's not just the number of jobs that are available, but I think it's also just the lack of good jobs, right? The ones that would give people the opportunity to do things like that. But
yeah, and also those jobs are necessary. So even if somebody's going to move on in 3 years and we get that upward path, the jobs themselves are probably about 20 to 30% of Americans work in those jobs. And we need those services. So they need to be paid fairly and have benefits. So the idea of increasing inflation when minimum wage goes up, that's definitely true. You can keep kind of chasing your tail by doing that. But if benefits are taken care of then by the companies, then that helps the government not have to pay the benefits for the folks. That's another thing that disincentivizes somebody to get a job. If you're going to work full time and you still need to get help from the government, how does that make you feel?
Right. Yeah.
So,
yeah, it doesn't really make you feel like much of a provider, right?
exactly.
So,
Oh,
okay.
one last thing. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I do want to say that even though I think that trend is true, I think that young people are very motivated. They may just be disincentivized. But if you look at overall worker productivity, it keeps going up in the United States. We keep getting more productive by whatever magic standard they determine that by.
Okay. So from an insider's point of view, if Vice President Harris is successful in November, she'd take Governor Walz with her. Who do you think might be some names in the running to be the next governor of Minnesota? I know we have Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan now, but would there be any other challengers within the party in your estimation?
I think that depends on how it goes, how Peggy does, and how people feel, how she feels, and
how much left would she have of the term?
I don't know.
Okay,
I should.
Yeah,
know
I don't
that,
know either. I should know that too. Yeah. Yeah. So it'll depend on how well she does.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
I think it's a while because I think Governor Walz was just reelected not long ago.
Well, he got elected in 2018, and is it a 4-year term? So if it's a 4-year term, I guess he'd be up again in 2026, right? Because 18 to 22, and then 22 to 26 would be 2 4-year terms.
Yes.
Okay. And
if it's 4-year terms,
if it's a 4-year term,
yeah.
But I think well, I don't know if they would hold
right.
a special election or anything like that. Would just probably in this circumstance. I mean, Hubert H. Humphrey was on the presidential ticket wasn't he running as the governor of Minnesota, or was he a senator?
He was a senator.
Okay, so I don't know if this has actually ever happened in the history of our state.
I don't know. No, probably not in Minnesota.
Yeah. So, well, something to look into. Okay, Aaron Kjenaas, let's talk about something else.
Okay. Yeah, that was a lot of politics.
That was a lot of politics.
I appreciate you asking me all those questions.
Yeah, and I don't know. Did you want to make any final remarks before we move on?
I would just say for folks here, come join us. We really want more people to come in, and if you're interested in freedom, that's what we stand for right now. You don't want people telling you what to do? Come on over to the Democratic Party.
Okay. All right. So you graduated from Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Right?
I did, yes.
So are you a Yinzer originally?
A what? That tells you probably no, because I don't know what that is.
I thought a Yinzer was somebody who was from Pittsburgh.
Oh, okay. No, I'm originally from Cherokee, Iowa.
Oh.
So it was a big trip for me. It was because I was very interested in theater in high school, and so we looked around at what were the colleges that you had to audition to get into that would be the best training for an actor. That's what my original goal was.
Did you like Pittsburgh when you were there?
I didn't see much of Pittsburgh. It was Carnegie Mellon is like a very intensive conservatory program almost. It is a university, so I had to take elective courses, but you would be in a movement class starting at 8 in the morning, and then you do voice and speech acting, and all day until you get a dinner break, and then you do sets. You'd build sets, you do work on tech and lights until
so
about 10.
Comprehensive.
Yeah. So it was only like an 8 in the morning until 10 at night kind of work thing.
That is so cool. Is it still like that to this?
It's still an intensive program. They probably aren't quite, they probably don't wear people down quite as much. Yeah. One of the things that they've changed is back then, it was a cut system. So it was very much like the Marines. When we got up there on stage in my freshman year, there were 64 people in the theater or the acting department.
Oh, yeah.
And they said, look to your right, look to your left. Those 2 people won't be there when you graduate. Uh-huh. So our class graduated with 21, and nobody quit, of their own. Maybe 1 or 2 quit because they wanted to quit. The rest were cut. Were
actually cut from the program.
Yeah.
Were they given the opportunity to remain in the university, or
some of them
major in something else? Or
Well, that's funny you mentioned that. I know somebody that switched over to directing because they were asked to leave the acting department.
They didn't make the cut.
They did not make the cut. Not a good way to function. I'm glad they're not doing that anymore because creating out of fear, it works for a little while, but it's not a good thing.
Well, fosters a
That
sense
being
of
said,
competitiveness, though, certainly, right?
yeah. Well,
So you studied acting there.
I did.
Okay. What's your philosophy of acting?
Well, I'm a Stanislavski guy, so I'm a method acting guy and an actors theater guy. So the acting that came out of the Moscow Art Theater in the 1800s. Stanislavski was a director, and his basic premise is to really become the character to the degree that you can. And so he's got a very specific kind of technique about how to do that, which works really well when you're in theater, because they would rehearse for 3 to 6 months and then do a play.
Yeah.
So how do you transform that into theater now or television? You've got to truncate that. But the basic thing is put yourself in the situation and believe it.
Yeah. I read a book on acting by Sanford Meisner. Did you ever hear about Sanford Meisner?
Yeah.
He said the foundation of acting is the reality of doing. Is that a method acting statement?
Doobie 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 doo.
Well,
it's doing and being. Yep.
Doing and being. Doobie
Yes.
doobie. I love it. Okay.
So Stanislavski started out talking about being the character,
Yeah.
becoming the character. And
Yeah.
then later on in his career, he started talking. He had what do you do? What actions do you do throughout the course of this scene? And what are you trying to get?
Yeah.
So he went very much from feeling to doing, and it's a combination.
So, think of these extreme examples that you've heard about, like when Jim Carrey was trying to play Andy Kaufman in The Man in the Moon, and he just never broke character, I guess, for the entire time that he was doing the filming. Is that a part of, is that just some caricature of the Stanislavski method, or did he actually encourage that sort of thing?
No, Stanislavski did not encourage fully living every moment of your life that way, except when you were in rehearsal. And, the rehearsing for 6 months, there's a lot of times where you're inhabiting or becoming the character. But that's sort of an extreme thing. If it helps the actor concentrate and helps them feel like they're there and real, fine. I never went that far, but I did isolate myself before shows and before I went on to get into where I was, what I wanted, what I was going to do. So it takes a certain level of concentration.
What do you do when you're going from, standing in line at McDonald's and, having a cheeseburger with your friends, and then driving over to campus and everything like that, and now I'm acting? Like, what kind of process, how long does it take, and what do you do to sort of get yourself ready mentally to step into that?
If it's a period piece, take off your watch.
Okay. Yeah.
And then, just you over the course of, by the time you're performing, you've read the script many times, and you've made a lot of decisions about who you are and how you're going to present that to the audience. And so, I guess the process is longer when you are first starting a role, and then as you've done it more and you've inhabited it, you might only have to prepare for 5 minutes before when you go into the dressing room.
So it just becomes more like second nature.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, and I saw that you have lived in both New York and LA, the two big places for actors, right?
Yeah.
And you did some off-Broadway work with Sigourney Weaver.
Yeah, I worked at Classic Stage Company as part of my internship for equity in order to get into the Professional Actors Union. So I worked there for a season. And I worked at Portland Stage Company for a season in Portland, Maine, and that is how I got my professional acting card. Sigourney Weaver was delightful.
Yeah.
It was a production of Merchant of Venice.
Oh.
And it was a really good learning experience because she showed me her script and the notes she took and how thorough she was about everything. Every thought, everything that she did was all written down there, and it was so neat to see that. And her performance is very detailed and very realistic. And there was another actor in there. His name was John Seitz, who played Shylock, it's incredible.
It's a pound of flesh, right?
Yeah. Incredible actor. And it's just so good to learn and to be sort of in awe of these really skillful actors.
Maybe you can help me with this. You mentioned Shakespeare, Merchant of Venice. Shakespeare is obviously known as some of the greatest literature that's ever been written, and there's a lot of debate about whether it was all written by one person or and all that stuff. But appreciation of Shakespeare, it's difficult. I mean, for somebody to just say, okay, I want to go to a Shakespeare play and actually sit here and really enjoy it and really kind of understand it. What tips would you have for somebody who was actually not trying to act in a Shakespeare play, but, somebody who was interested in actually just getting something out of it and really appreciating it?
Well, I think that we do, even though we don't realize it. There's so many modern movies that are based on Shakespeare plays,
right?
That we've been.
But I'm talking about the pure form.
The language. I guess, go see a good production. Go to the Guthrie, because in a good production, they make it seem like they're talking these words. It's a lot of words. We don't talk that way anymore.
Right.
But if people can do it and make it seem like they're talking, it's delightful. It's really enjoyable.
Yeah.
It's funny if it's a comedy, and it can be very dramatic in say, if you go to Hamlet or something. And I think the comedies really work very well now. Well, I would look for something that isn't set in the period, that they modernize it, or put it in a different period, because I think that kind of makes it interesting as well. It's funny you mention this, because I was classically trained as an actor, but I never really was much of a Shakespeare fan. I did it, but I was like, okay, I don't really connect to this all. And part of the reason was, when we were trained, they taught us something called standard American speech, which is kind of like speaking very proper English, but you're not speaking British. So it was just like you would kind of have an accent that nobody had in the world and try to act that way. So it's really hard to make it
Isn't
natural.
that like the thespian accent?
Yes, and so we had to do phonetics and learn how to. And when I first went there, the first thing they said to me, I said, "I'm Aaron Chen." I said, "No, you're not Aaron. You're Aaron." I said, "I'm Aaron." So for about 3 months, I was calling myself Aaron, and then I said, "Screw that! I'm from Iowa. I'm Aaron, man." Yeah.
That's funny.
But my daughter loves it. She loves Shakespeare, and she's a high school teacher in Wapaton, North Dakota now.
Yeah.
And so she teaches it to her students.
She just starred in the Chicago production.
She
did an excellent job at that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Did you give her any coaching?
No, I didn't. She and her mother were both in the Northern Light
Yeah, they
Opera
both
Company.
were, right. Yeah.
And they worked together, and it was so fun for me to see it. And my daughter played Roxy Hart, who was one of the leads, and I'm completely unbiased when I say she was brilliant.
Yeah, she really was. Yeah, she did a tremendous job. And last year you were in the Little Shop production with Trevor Miller. There's playing Seymour.
Yes,
and you were the shopkeeper, which his name is escaping me now, but it was
Mushnik.
Mushnik, that's right. Yeah. And you seem to have a really good time with that too. I know Trevor was staying at my house last summer, so I remember I got to know him a little bit, and he must have been kind of fun to work with.
Oh, I had a great time with him. He was hilarious, and that was a really fun production. And my daughter was in that too. She was in the trio. But it was a different character for me, because I've gotten a little bit older. So, so it was the first time I kind of played a real old character part, and it was a blast. It was fun.
The Mushnik and Son, the dance routine that you guys, that must have taken a lot of work to get on the same page there, right?
It did. And Karen, the choreographer, is so good, because although I was a classically trained actor, I was a theater major, not a music theater major.
Okay.
So I had some basic dance classes, like tap and a little bit of jazz and a small bit of ballet, but not much.
Yeah.
So I'm not a dancer. She knows how to help people who can't dance look like they can dance.
Hey, that's a skill to have, right? Especially for this, it's invaluable for NLOC, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And this was a very heavy dance show, so and Karen did a great job.
And she's on the board now too. So.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, when you were in New York, where did you live?
Oh, I started by living in Brooklyn, Brooklyn Heights.
Yeah.
And I lived there for 2.5 years, and then I moved into Manhattan for the last 6 months that I was there.
Okay.
I lived in Herald Square, which is the same block.
Macy's Herald Square, 34th Street. Yeah.
Empire State Building is there.
Yeah.
And I actually left. I was acting there in off Broadway, and I had a small part in Another World, a soap opera. And right after I had shot that and found out that it wasn't going to be a recurring character, I was walking through Herald Square at lunchtime, and there were like thousands and thousands of people. It was like a punk rock concert at lunchtime, because so everybody's crowded together walking. Yeah. All of a sudden I heard this loud bang, like a shotgun going off. And I looked down and there was a piece of pizza at my feet. And so I put my hand up in the air to like guard from another falling pizza. And then all these people around me realized what the sound was too. And so there was like 1,000 of us standing like this to ward off a pizza falling from a skyscraper.
Somebody's throwing.
And I had my hand up in the other side. I'm buying my ticket back to the Midwest. And I literally went back to my apartment and got a ticket to Minneapolis.
Was it some kind of a prankster doing that? Or
I don't know.
Must have been, huh?
Somebody... It was just one piece, so hopefully it was an accident. But it was a pivotal moment for me.
I don't know when you live there, but Brooklyn Heights has certainly become a very, very ritzy place these days.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, I did live in Brooklyn Heights for 6 months with my girlfriend when I first moved there. A really nice area.
Yeah, it is. I lived in New York for about 14 years, and I lived in Brooklyn and then also Manhattan, but I was much more of a downtown person and an East Side person. You know?
Okay.
I don't like going to the. You know how it is, like
when
you're over there.
When you're in theater, you kind of have to go to the West Side.
Yeah,
the theater is
the theater's a West Side thing. Yeah, and so is the Lincoln Center and all that stuff. It seems like there's more artistic stuff going on the West Side, but
yeah.
I always, I don't know why, but I always enjoyed being.
I worked at Arista Records at night, which was right on 5th and 57th Street.
Oh, okay.
So it's kind of just on the east side.
Yeah, that's Midtown, right? I mean, you're pretty close to Central Park right there.
Yeah, just south of it.
Okay, I was going to ask you. So, Another World, that was in New York.
Yes.
Okay, and it sounds like, how long were you doing that?
It was just a day player role. So I had like 3 scenes, and I learned a lot because they give you the script. I had probably 7 or 8 pages of dialogue, and they give you the script the night before. You get
and
it
you
like
learn it, yeah.
Yeah, you learn it overnight, and then you go in and you have one rehearsal where you hit your marks, and then you go.
Wow.
And this was after I had done, theater for my whole life.
Yeah.
So it was intense.
How do the people who are on that every day? I mean, how do they process that amount of information? Do they memorize all those lines, or is it all done with cue cards?
No, they memorize them.
They do.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Part of what makes it easier once you're a recurring character is that the scenes are so similar. They kind of rewrite the same thing over and over again. It's the only form of drama that happens slower than real life.
Okay.
So you can come back 6 months later and it seems like it's a week later.
Okay, because things happen very slowly.
Yes.
Yeah, I understand that. And you also lived in L.A. for a while too, and lived as an actor. So which of the two did you prefer?
I preferred L.A.
Yeah.
I had lived in Minneapolis for 6 years between New York and L.A., and so I established myself as an actor quite a bit in Minneapolis. And then by the time I went to L.A., L.A. is much more Midwestern, believe it or not, because things are spread out. And New York is like really concentrated and gritty, and small town from Iowa to New York was not good, but L.A. was fun.
Yeah, and what kinds of jobs did you do out there as an actor?
I did. I made my living mostly doing voiceovers. So by the time I got out there, I was 30 something, and I went up for auditions for a lot of things, like the movie Gattaca, and was one of the director's choices, but Ethan Hawke was already a star, so it was hard to
Uma Thurman.
The voice of the Scream character was one that I was going to do, but then someone else from San Francisco stepped in at the last minute. So there were a lot of things that I came close to. But what I really thrived at was voiceovers, and then doing theater there too. There's a pretty strong theater company there, although it's somewhat different than in New York, because when you're performing in L.A., at least back in the 90s, I retired from acting in 2000, but back in the 90s, a lot of times the actors were acting to impress a casting director. So it wasn't so much about the total production, it was about how can I make myself look good. And that's not as fun.
I always imagine LA's kind of a real cutthroat area for actors, right? Everybody's like all fighting over the same, piece of food that's sitting there, and
well, every place is a a cutthroat place for actors.
I'm sure.
But, just to give you an example, I went to a commercial audition when I was out there one time, and there were probably about 100 actors in the room, and I looked around and I said, okay, these people could be my brother, some of them could be me, I could hardly tell.
Yeah.
So they were very specific
Yeah.
about what they wanted.
Oh, you mean like in terms of this is the kind of,
That's
okay.
the look that they were looking for.
Okay, yeah.
So
Yep.
you realize there's a tremendous amount of competition.
And how to stand out is, I guess, who knows, right? That's a tough thing.
Yep. Have a relative, have luck, or have persistence. Just keep going. The numbers, eventually you get it.
Don't give up.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so you retired from acting in 2000, and you began a career as a medical health science advisor. Mm-hmm. What is that?
That is, I go around to doctors' offices, hospitals, long-term care facilities, and talk about medications, where they may be appropriate for certain patients and where they may not be appropriate, and sort of work as a consultant.
Okay, all right. And is that satisfying work to you now?
It is satisfying. It's very different than acting, other than you have to memorize a lot of data and then share it.
Yeah.
But my dad was a doctor and my mom was a social worker, so I always kind of was interested in the terminology and being able to help people. And now I'm working with a company that specializes in helping people with mental health problems.
Oh.
And my dad was a psychiatrist and my mom a social worker, so it just, I think it kind of fit in with my family and things that I was interested in other than acting in the creative, which I still get to do on an amateur level every now and then.
Yeah, that's right. And you do it well, too, for NLOC at least. I don't know what else you do, but I've certainly enjoyed your work over the years with NLOC. So.
Thank you.
Do you have any, is this your area? Do you plan to remain in this Park Rapids area for the time being at least? And
Yes.
And
yes,
what do you like about it?
Oh, it's just so relaxing to live here. I mean, the winters are somewhat tough, but I do like to change the seasons. But the summers, you just can't beat it.
Right.
I mean, you can golf. There's lots of good restaurants. There's things to do. Minnesota, it's a great place. U.S. News and World
full
Report
circle,
number 4.
Right? Yeah. Is there any business or restaurant that you think Park Rapids could use or needs?
Well, you can always use more restaurants.
Yeah.
I don't have any specific idea, but I don't think another restaurant would always be good. I mean, the ones that we have are great, but they're all different. So I think would probably be room for another one that had a different kind of cuisine.
Yeah, yeah. So you've gone through a lot of different places and paths in life, and you've had so many different experiences. It sounds like you've had a very rich life up to this point. So what kind of advice would you give to a young person who is looking to have that kind of a life?
Well, if you want to become an actor, I suggest starting early. So even if you want to go to college, go to college in Los Angeles or New York.
Okay.
Or possibly Chicago.
Yeah.
If you want to make a career out of it, particularly if you want to be in television or film.
Start your network up.
Yeah, because if you go to, say, a conservatory in Pittsburgh like I did, and then you do regional theater for many years, by the time you get to Los Angeles or New York and you want to get a part, there are already people that they can bank on that have done guest star roles or lead roles even in films. And
it's not fair, but it's true, right?
It's not fair, but it's true.
Life's not fair. Yeah.
Yeah. You have to start early, and then you'll do well. Just keep at it.
Yeah. So get out to one of the coasts early on and be persistent.
And be ready to develop a thick skin, because you're going to get a lot of doors shut in your face. And the other thing I'd say in terms of acting is one of the things I did early on that was a mistake is I was like, I'll just let my work speak for itself. So I'd go in to a casting director and I'd do my monologue or I'd do the script and feel like I did a pretty good job, but I wasn't very personable to them. I almost felt like, okay, I don't want to kiss up to them.
Yeah.
So I would suggest really just seeing the casting director or the director or whoever is in a sense of power over you, just see them as a person and be empathetic of what they're going through and let your confidence come through that way. Because if you only do it in your work, but you kind of are standoffish and I don't think that works as well.
People skills, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I'm always talking about people skills in here, and I always bring up my one of my favorite books, How to Win Friends and Influence People, because it gives you those tips, and I think people really they emphasize so much content and academic learning and things like that, but if you neglect your people skills, you could be a better actor and yet not get the role. right?
Exactly. And it probably applies to other businesses as well.
I mean, it does. It applies, I think, to every business, and not just business, but in personal relationships as well. So always being mindful of the person that you're talking to and being attentive to what their needs are, not as much of me, but so. Aaron Kjenaas, it's been really great talking to you. I know we had to go through a political discussion earlier, and not always my favorite subject, but I appreciate you coming on and representing the Hubbard County Democrats well today, and I also enjoyed talking about acting and who you are as a person. It's been great having you, and I hope that you'll come back someday.
Well, thank you, Zach. Thanks very much for the opportunity.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on.
You bet.